This is Matt for cgtouch.com, and in the second part of our Swiss Army knife tutorial, we're first of all going to be adding in the rest of the detail to this main block section, and then we're going to go ahead and add in the rest of the tools. Now we've got a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. Now the first thing we're going to do is create this yellow kind of circular bit here, which the keyring attachment comes onto, and that's part of this yellow block here that we had to reshape. Now before we start modeling, I'm going to make sure that all of our scenes are set up as they should be. So first of all, you can see that I've got these little black dots on all the verts, and that's up here under shaded visibility options, show vertices, so you want that guy checked on. Then over here I'm going to select the empty mesh layer that we've got left over. I'm going to hide everything but that for the minute, except for our refs. I'm going to make sure that only the set to refs group is visible. With that done, I'm going to fold up that guy, and we're going to come in and take a look at what we're doing. So obviously the first thing you see when you look at this is a cylinder, so we're going to come up to the basic tab and click on the cylinder tool, and then going to click and drag in the middle of that hole and drag out that cylinder. Now I'm not going to worry about it overlapping the main body or kind of this part of it for the moment. I'm just going to look to get the majority of it correct. So we want both of these radiuses to be the same, so I think 2.5 looks to be pretty good. So I'm going to set both of those to 2.5 millimeters, hit OK. Sides 24, well, that seems to give us enough detail. I mean, this is quite a small section of the keyring, so this is giving us enough detail for this curve to be quite smooth. It's not going to look blocky in the final render, so 24 is pretty good for now. So when you're happy with that and that's in place, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. And you notice when we mouse over, it's not selecting, so it's flipped the other way. Now in Modo, when nothing is selected within a mesh layer, it's essentially like everything is selected. So instead of coming in and selecting this polygon, sorry, in polygon mode, so instead of coming in and selecting it and flipping it, without selecting anything, if you hit F, it will flip all of the polygons within that mesh layer. So it's kind of a useful thing to remember. When nothing is selected, it's like everything is selected. So anything that you do will work on all of the polygons, the verts, or the edges, depending on what mode you're in. Now with this polygon created, I'm going to select it and hit B for bevel. And I'm just going to bevel that in to create that inner circle like that. With that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and I'm going to delete that circle. We then come into the top view. I'm going to grab this guy and move it into position. So, going to the side like that. I'm going to hit X for extrude, right click to activate, and pull that out so that it matches the reference. And we want this to be exactly in the center on the X axis. So I'm going to double click it to select it all, come to the basic tab, center selected, and click X. And that moves over a little bit. Now I'm going to bring back our blocks layer. And you'll notice that our block here is actually slightly off the center line, so I'm going to come up to our blocks layer and select that. In polygon mode, I'm going to double click this middle block and go basic, center selected, and X, and that shifts ever so slightly to the right, and so that's now perfectly in the center. So I'm going to go back to perspective and take a look at what we've got. So now obviously we have this shape that we need to join into this shape, and I don't want to see the rest of these objects, I just want to work on these two. So in the blocks layer, I'm going to double click this item. I'm going to hit Shift H to hide everything that isn't selected. So Shift H and everything else goes away. So now we can just work on these two objects here. With that done, I'm going to come into a side view and we can start tweaking some of these verts so that we can join these two shapes together. Now the first thing you'll notice is that this yellow curve here, if you follow this, kind of kicks up towards the main body of this block, and also you notice that it kind of attaches to the main body just above these verts here and just below these guys down there. So the first thing we're going to do is in the blocks layer, we're going to move these verts up into position. So I'm going to grab these guys, I'm going to move them along this edge here. So I'm going to grab the move tool, I'm just going to move it up and slightly to the right, just so that this kind of outer vert here meets this yellow curve like that. When you're happy, hit space. I'm going to do the same thing for these bottom verts. So I'm just going to move them down and slightly to the right to match that edge. And we're just going to get it so this vert is at the end of that yellow curve like that. So space to drop the tool. Now I'm going to select our mesh layer and I'm going to hide our blocks layer temporarily. Now what we need to do is delete some extra polygons. So I'm going to lasso select around these guys in here. So I've got 4 polygons selected, and I'm going to hit delete to get rid of them. And then I'm going to select all of these verts, activate the scale tool with R, and with negative scale turned off, I'm going to slam those down so they're all in line on the Z-axis. I'm going to grab them all and move them very close to this inner circle, and we're just basically kind of getting them out of the way for the minute. We'll position them properly in a second when everything's joined up. Now with that done, I'm going to bring back our blocks layer so that we've no longer got anything overlapping. We can kind of see both individual objects extremely clearly. Now I'm going to make kind of this cylinder shape kind of follow this join, follow this kick, and I'm going to use this existing vert to do that. So I'm going to grab these guys and move these up into place. And I'm going to try and maintain kind of an equal spacing between these verts. So I'm just going to follow the background ref like that. I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to grab this vert and move this down like that. So we're just following this ref as it starts to curve in towards the main body of the block. So like that. With that down, I'm going to come back to perspective and take a look at what we've got. So I'm going to come into a top view. If I zoom in slightly, you'll notice that our cylinder section here is ever so slightly thinner than the main body of our block. So what we're going to do is add in two edges that match the edges of this cylinder, and that'll make things a lot easier to join them together. So to do that, I'm going to select our blocks layer. I'm going to select one of these edges in here and hit Alt-C for the loop slice tool. Now with our mode set to symmetry, and you can set this in this drop down here. I mean, we've been using free up to now. If you want to select symmetry, and our count set to 2, I'm going to right click to activate the tool. Now the symmetry mode of the loop slice tool is a very, very useful mode indeed. Basically, if you think of the polys that you're working on, if you take those guys and split them directly down the center, what this tool is doing is mirroring any cuts you make on one side of the line on the other side. So another way of explaining it would be to look at this bar up here. Now this represents the poly that you're working on. The arrows represent the cuts that you are adding in. So we've got one cut that is 7% from the side of the polygon, and because we're in symmetry mode, we're mirroring it over so that this other cut is 7% from the other side. Now if you move one of these arrows or drag in the viewport, both of these edges move so that they're always equidistant from the side. So this one is now 26% from the left, this one will be 26% from the right. And this works if you add in more in the count. So if I add in 4 and right click, you'll see that we just have two cuts now on either side of this midpoint. So as you move one, the other one moves on the other side, and you can add these in and move these around as much as you want. Now we only want 2, so I'm going to hit 2 and right click to make that change. Then I'm going to left click and drag in the viewport to get these edges in line with these edges on the cylinder. So about there looks pretty good. I think this is pretty much lining up. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and go back to perspective mode. And then I'm just going to come into our blocks layer and delete both of these inside polygons. And then we can go ahead and join these two together. And to do that, I'm going to come into our mesh layer. I'm going to hit Control X to cut our cylinder shape out, and then paste it back into our blocks layer. Then we can delete our temporary mesh layer for now. So I'm going to select that guy and delete it. Reselect our blocks layer. Then we're going to come in and start creating these polygons. Now in edges mode, first thing I'm going to do is grab both of these top edges. I'm going to come to the edge menu, click bridge, and right click, which creates a vert in there. Sorry, a poly in there. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom, so I'm going to grab this edge and this edge. I'm going to bridge and right click to activate. And what that does is it gives us the opportunity to come in and double click these edge loops. Now what's going on there? Aha! I missed a polygon down there, so I'm going to have to delete that guy. And then we should be able to come in and select that edge loop. That looks better. That's what I expected. So now we have this closed edge loop. With it all selected, we can hit P to create polygon. Now you notice that apparently nothing happened. However, if I go to poly mode, you'll see that there is something there. It's just flipped around, and it was automatically selected because it was the poly that we just created. So with that selected, I'm going to hit F twice to flip that around the correct way. Then we're going to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to double click this edge loop to select that entire thing, hit P to create a poly, and that time it was created the right way around. Now I'm going to deselect by clicking off, and we're just going to add in one cut using the edge slice tool, which is C, between the middle of the cylinder and the middle of these two faces here. hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So C, and then drag out that edge like that. Now, as you know, when we use the bevel tool, we create extra edges and extra verts and things like that. So instead of coming up and splitting these polygons up into quads now, we're going to bevel first so that we can see any extra verts we have when we make them into quads. It's going to make things a lot easier for us. So, to bevel, we're going to select this edge loop. So I'm going to double click that guy. Double click the edge loop on the other side. I'm going to double click this middle one and the one on the other side as well. And then we're just going to go in and select any extra edges we need. Now we're going to select all of these guys that basically surround where the cylinder joins into the main body of this block. I'm going to get any ones that the loop select tool missed out as well. So with these all selected, so 96 edges, I'm going to hit B for bevel, right click to activate. I'm just going to drag out a nice big bevel on that. So something like that. I'll hit space to drop the tool, then we're going to have to come in and clean up a few verts. Now, often when you're beveling things like this, you get this kind of thing happening. You've got a little tiny try in here, which has turned this quad into a 5-sided polygon. And it's very simple to fix. You just have to grab these two verts, come up to the vertex menu, and click join, and join them together. And because it's happened on one side, it's most probably happened on the other. There, so I'm going to select both of these, click join, OK. I'm just going to go around and make sure that's not happening in any other places. So it's happening down here as well, so I'm going to click both of these, click join, OK, and OK, and the same thing there. So select them both, join, OK, and OK. And then just a quick check round, make sure everything else is looking fine. It seems to be looking pretty good. Like it. Now you notice that we've got these 5-sided polygons at the top here and also underneath it here as a result of our bevel. So we're going to solve that quickly. I'm going to come in with the edge slice tool, which is C. I'm going to draw an extra edge around here like this and joining up the other side. And this gives us these quads here and these quads here. We're going to do exactly the same on the top. So I'm going to come up, C for the edge slice tool, drag out an extra edge around like that. That also kind of sorts out some of these smoothing errors that we had there. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Now we can come in and sort out these side polygons. So I'm going to activate the edge slice tool again. I'm going to drag out a quad there. Now we're going to end up with a try there, which isn't terrible, but that's okay. Actually, I tell you what, before we do this, I'm going to undo, Control Z. We're actually going to get rid of these edges in here because we don't need those. That's just adding in some extra polygons. So I'm going to select all of those edges and delete them. And that gives us these two big ones there to work with. I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going to grab just these edges in here. So basically what I'm doing is, instead of splitting this section up into two kind of columns of polygons, we're just going to have one column. And that's just going to decrease our poly count, yeah, by like, 8. But if you do this occasionally throughout the model, then you'll kind of save a couple of hundred here and there. So it'll really kind of lighten the model in the end. Now we're going to activate the edge slice tool again and drag out a quad there. I'm going to have a try going to the middle. And I'm just looking to get quads where possible, and if you can't, a try, that's fine really. So that's a quad, try, quad and quad. So that side is now done. I'm going to do the same over here. So edge slice tool, drag one up there. So we've got two quads on this side of this middle line. Get a quad down to there, and then a try up to the middle. Now just to check, I'm going to come to our list tab, kind of expand this slightly. Then in our statistics panel, I'm going to drop down our polygons by vertex, and you see that I've got no polygons with more than 4 verts. So this is now completely connected, and all of our blocks are now done. So with our blocks layer selected, I'm going to hit U on my keyboard to unhide the rest of those objects in that layer. And then we can go on and start creating these little yellow cylinders. Now it's pretty simple really. We're going to go to a left view. I'm going to create a new item and rename it to cylinders, for lack of a better word. I'm going to zoom in on one of them, come up to the basic tab, and grab our cylinder tool, and then just drag out the cylinder like that. Now we want them to be, this is to be an exact circle, so we want both of these radiuses to be the same. 24 sides is a little bit overkill for this, so I'm going to drop that down to 12. and then, well, maybe 16. Drop that up to 16. There you go, looks a bit better. So I'm going to get it into position on this axis, and then going to come to the top view. I'm going to drag it out to one side, and then using this red cross in the middle, I'm going to click and drag that out to the right to give that guy some width. With that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, double click to select our new cylinder, and then in the basic tab, I'm going to make sure it's on the x-axis with the center selected option. With that done, now that we know that our cylinder is exactly at 0 on the x-axis, we can come up and turn on symmetry on the x to save us some time when we're doing our bevels. So back in perspective mode, I'm going to come and grab this end poly. I'm going to hold down Shift and come up here to plus bounds to select the edges surrounding it. I'm then going to hit B for bevel and drag out a very slight edge bevel on that. Now what's left is to grab this middle poly. I'm going to bevel it in slightly, and instead of just dropping the tool, I'm going to come up here to the vertex menu and click join averaged, and that takes that entire poly and squashes it down to a single vert. With that done, we need to copy this into position, so I'm going to double click to select it and go to a left view, and then going to Control C, Control V to get another copy. We're going to move this out into position. So down like that. Make sure that's nicely lined up. Out there. Control C, Control V to get another copy, and we'll pull that guy up into place there. And there's one more over here, so Control C, Control V one last time, and we'll pull this guy up like about there, I think. So with that done, I'm going to go back to perspective mode, take a look at what we've got. Now I'm going to come up and save our scene. So File, Save As, I'm going to save as 4. Oh, wait for this to come up. There you go. 4_ blocks done, and hit save. Then we can come up here to our all references group, and now we're done with the set 2 refs, so I'm going to hide those guys and bring in the set 3 refs. And these are the references for the tools that are on the bottom of the penknife, so we're going to go in and start taking a look at those guys. So moving on, first thing I'm going to do is create a new mesh item, and then we're going to hide our cylinders and our blocks layer. And if I come into a right view, you'll see that all of our reference images are piled on top of each other, and that's not really going to help us at all. So we're going to come up to our set 3 refs group and toggle that down, and we're going to hide absolutely everything in here apart from set3_ needle threader. Now, don't take my word for it that that is in fact a needle threader. I've never used this tool in my life, but I've always been told that it's a needle threader, so that's what I've gone with. Now, before we kind of carry on from here, I just want to say that if you've got this far, you're going to have no trouble whatsoever modeling the rest of these tools. If you've had a little bit of trouble and stuff, but you've managed to get through to this point, we're just going to be using the same tools that we've used to create the rest of the tools in this model. It's nothing really particularly that complicated at all once you break them down into their individual components. So we're going to start with the needle threader, and to do that we're going to come up to the polygon menu and click on the pen tool. Now I just want to point out that this tool is also available in the basic tab here, so it's this third one in there. So if we click that, we get the pen tool. Now making sure all of these options are turned off down here apart from a flip polygon. I'm just going to start drawing out some verts here. Now for this curve, obviously we don't want to draw out the entire curve with the pen tool. I'm just going to put one vert down for the minute, and then we'll come back and tweak that in a second. So I'm going to carry on and just putting a vert on each of these points, and we'll just tweak them in a little bit. So with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and we can go in and tweak some of these verts around. Now I'm going to start at this end. We're just going to grab some of these verts and kind of move them into position a little bit. Let's tweak them ever so slightly until they're correct. That one a little bit like that. Come back to the end here. I'm going to grab this edge, activate the scale tool, and with negative turned off, I'm going to slam this down on the z-axis. This is perfectly straight. I'm going to do the same thing for the top here, so R, and slam it down on the y-axis, and I'm going to do the same thing for this edge here, so I'm going to slam this down on the y-axis. So that just makes these perfectly straight. Now this vert here, we want to be in a very specific place. We want it to be at the end of this line, so if this edge was to continue slightly into the middle here, that vert would be on that edge, so maybe just about there. So this line kind of joins up with that. And then we want it also to be directly below this vert. So I'm going to move that slightly right, like that. So these two are now in line. Go left, like that. With that done, we can grab it and perform a vertex bevel with the B key. So with that done and a round level set to 3, I'm going to right click to activate and drag that out like that. Now I'm going to get that to match the reference. Now this vert at the top here is getting very close to this one, but don't worry about that too much for now. So something like that looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Then we can come in, I'm just going to grab this vert, shift click this vert, I'm going to come to the vertex menu and click join. We're just going to join both of those guys together. With that done, I'm now going to come up and rename our mesh layer to needle threader. And with that layer selected, I'm going to hit Control G to group that. I'm going to rename that group to bottom tools. If you toggle down that group, you can see our needle threader layer in there. And you'll notice that we've got these 4 orange squares as well next to the eye for the needle threader layer, and that basically means that that's the layer we're working in. We're currently editing within the needle threader layer. Now we're going to carry on and preemptively inset this polygon slightly to stop any smoothing errors that we might have later on in the model. So I'm going to grab this polygon, hit B for the bevel tool, and we're just going to inset this in a little bit of the way. Now what I'm looking to do is get this about half of the way between this circle and the edge. So about there looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit space to drop that. I'm then going to select all of these hard edges. So I'm going to come to the mag here, select this one as well, and these two, and we're going to bevel those just with a round level of 0, just so they're like that. And essentially what we're doing is creating the side profile of this entire object so that when we extrude it out, all of these edges will already be beveled. Now we're going to go ahead and start adding in our cylinder. So what I'm going to do is first of all make a cut so that we isolate the end of this needle threader from the rest of the main body. So with the slice tool, which is Shift C, I'm just going to drag an extra edge down like that and hit space to drop the tool. I'm then going to come into a new item layer, so a new mesh layer, come up to the basic tab and click on the cylinder tool, and we're going to draw out this cylinder. Now the two important things are that both of these radiuses are the same, which they now are, and the other thing is that we make it slightly bigger than the hole on the reference. So I'd say somewhere around there. So 156, let's see if we can go up to 16. Yeah, 16 looks pretty good, I think. So with that done, and with 16 sides, so that's going to give us enough detail for this model. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. We can go in and make sure that it's the right way around, which it is, because it highlights when we hover over it. Now we have to integrate this into the needle threader itself. So I'm going to come back to the needle threader layer and delete this inside polygon. Then back in the mesh layer, we're going to hit Control X to cut, come to our needle threader layer and hit Control V to paste that guy into place. We can then delete our empty mesh layer up here. Select our needle threader layer again, and now we have to create some polygons to integrate this into place. In looking how to connect these two shapes together, you'll notice that we have a straight edge here, which is directly opposite a point on the circle. Now on the other side we have a straight edge, which is also directly opposite a point. And this is true for the top and the bottom as well. So what we're going to do is grab this circle, and we're going to rotate it ever so slightly on X, like that. What this gives us, if I drop the tool, is a straight edge that can connect to a straight edge on every side of this circle. So I'm going to select both of these edges here, come to the edge menu and click the bridge tool, and I'm just going to right click. We're going to do this the same for both of these edges, so bridge tool and right click. Same for both of these guys as well, so bridge tool and right click. And the same for these guys and right click with the bridge tool. And this just gives us these holes that we have to go and fill in. So I'm going to come in and grab this edge loop here, and I'm going to hit P to create a polygon. Now you notice that we can't see it, so it's facing away from us. So I'm going to go to poly mode, and you'll see it's the only one selected. And you can check that down here where it says just one polygon. So with that selected, I'm going to hit F twice to flip it round, deselect it, then come and select this edge loop, hit P for polygon. We have the same problem, so I'm going to go back to polygon mode, and because we just deselected that, only the one that we just created is now selected. So I'm going to hit F twice to flip that guy around as well. Back to edge mode, we're going to do the same thing for these, so P for poly, We're going to have to flip that one around as well, so double F on that. Then we're going to select this edge loop and hit P, and that one works. Cool. So what we're going to do is split both of these polygons up into quads. We're going to use the edge slice tool, which is C. And I'm going to drag from this edge to this edge, which makes both of these quads. And I'm going to do the same thing up here, like this. Now for both of these polygons, we have a little bit of a kind of an issue. Essentially it gets very thin here, so we don't really want to fill this up with an awful lot of edges. So what I'm going to do is, with the edge slice tool, which is C, I'm going to come in and drag to this edge. Then we're just going to drag out an extra edge to the very side here. We're going to do the same thing for this one. And this splits this engon up into 3 quads. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side over here. So we're going to drag out an extra edge to the side and do the same thing here as well. And with that done, all of these are now quads, and we're just left with this giant engon for this hole in the middle. Now for the minute we're going to leave the hole, and we're going to come over to this section and start cutting this up into quads. So just like before, I'm going to use the slice tool, which is Shift C, to isolate this section away from the rest of the pedal. So I'm just going to drag an extra edge down like that. So what this does is basically leave all this section as quads. Then we can start with the edge slice tool, which is C. I'm going to start by drawing an extra edge there, which gives us this quad at the end. Now we have to try and figure out how to cut all of these up. So essentially I think I'm going to add in an extra edge down there with the slice tool, which is Shift C. And using this we can come in and start creating these quads. So I'm going to create a triangular quad there like that. I'm going to create this one across the bottom. I'm going to create another triangular one there. And I'm going to create this one up here. And that gives us all quads. Now I think at this point we should only have one polygon with more than 5 vertices. So I'm going to come down to our statistics panel, just pull that up slightly, and under polygons by vertex more than 4, you can see it's white, which means that the only polygon is selected. So you've got one with more than 4 verts in it, which is exactly what we want. So at this point we can go in and start adding some thickness to our needle threader. So I'm going to quickly go into a bottom view, and I'm going to bring back our main segments layer, which will enable us to see the gaps which the tools are supposed to fit into. Now the needle threader tool is actually the second tool from the right, so it's in this gap down here. So what I'm going to do is, in poly mode, I'm going to select all of the polys that make up our needle threader. I'm going to activate the move tool and move them into this gap. I'm going to zoom in slightly. We want to leave a bit of a gap to give it some room to rotate. I'm going to activate the extrude tool with the X key, right click to activate, and I'm just going to drag this over to fill in that segment there. Now we're going to have a little gap on this side as well. But with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. We're going to go back to perspective mode and turn off our main segments layer. Now we have 2 things left to do. We have to make this whole section, and we have to bevel both of these edge loops. So with those guys selected, I'm going to hit B for bevel, right click to activate, and I'm just going to drag out a nice big bevel on those. So somewhere around there looks pretty good. And then we can go in and create our holes. So I'm going to select both of these circular polygons. I'm going to activate the bevel tool, and I'm going to inset them slightly using the red handle. And this gives us this extra row of polygons surrounding the hole, which will stop any smoothing errors we might get. I'm going to shift click to reactivate, inset again, about the same distance, and shift it in slightly as well. And then without dropping the tool or without deselecting our polygons, I'm going to come up to the edge menu, click on the bridge tool, and right click. And that basically adds this row of quad polygons joining our 2 selected circular polygons. So that is our hole selected, and with that done, our needle threader is now complete. So if I bring back our main segments and our main side plate, you'll see that this fits nicely into position in there. So we can now move on to our next tool. So I'm going to quickly hide our main side plate and my main segments layer. I'm going to come up to our set 3 refs group. We're going to turn on our nail file right ref and turn off our set 3 needle threader ref. I'm then going to create a new mesh layer and rename it to nail file. And I'm going to drag that guy up into the bottom tools group. We're going to go back to a right view to take a look at our ref. And then obviously our needle threader is in the way, So I'm going to turn the eye off of that one. Now when we created the needle threader, we used entirely polygonal modeling techniques. We didn't use any subdivision surfaces whatsoever. So I figured for the nail file, we'd go in and use entirely subdivision surfaces. And I'd kind of show you how that works within Modo. But before we do, I just quickly want to go over what exactly subdivision surfaces are, very briefly, and also kind of how you use them within Modo. So I'm going to jump over very quickly to Wikipedia, and it says here that a subdivision surface in the field of 3D computer graphics is a method of representing a smooth surface by the specification of a coarser piecewise linear polygon mesh. So that's fairly straightforward, I think. I don't think I need to go into any more detail on that, so we're going to jump back to Modo, and we'll try and explain that a little bit clearer maybe. So I'm going to click the New Scene button at the bottom of our item mesh to enter a new scene. I'm going to come up to the Basic tab, click on the cube tool, and I'm just going to draw us out a nice big polygon like that, and hit space to drop the tool. Now our single polygon here has 4 edges and 4 verts, and that's a key thing to remember. Now I'm going to quickly put this into subdivision surface mode by hitting the tab key on my keyboard, and that's the one just above the caps lock. And right now I just want you to take a look at the overall shape and see what happens when we enter subdivision surface mode. So I'm going to hit tab, and you'll notice straight away that we've gone from our square shape into this circular one. Now, where did our square go? Well, if we hit tab, we get our square back. So it's obviously a toggle on and off thing. It's not a destructive thing that you can't undo. So that's the first thing to remember about subdivision surfaces. Now I'm going to go into tab again, but as I do, watch what happens to this top left vert. So at the moment it's right on this line. It's about there. So I'm going to keep my mouse there and hit tab. And you'll see that our vert has moved all the way from here down to here. And the same is true of all of the other verts. They've all moved ever so slightly towards each other. Now, don't get kind of confused and think that all of these are moving towards the middle. They're actually all being pulled towards each other, and that's the key thing with subdivision surfaces. What Modo is doing is it's saying, okay, you've entered subdivision surface mode, I'm going to pull all of these verts ever so slightly towards each other, and in doing so, add in some extra detail. And that's these extra edges you can see that round the edge of our shape. So that's why our square has turned into a circle. Modo has automatically gone in and added in this extra detail for us. So this actually right now looks like a 16-sided cylinder. So why don't I slightly move that to the side. I'm going to go into a new mesh layer. I'm going to name this first one SDS, and we'll just leave this one as mesh 2. And I'm going to come up and with a cylinder tool, I'm going to draw us out a 16-sided cylinder. And with that done, you'll notice that the two shapes look pretty much exactly the same, but there is one key difference that you can see here. The one that we just created, the entirely polygonal shape, has many more of these black dots around it. And these are all the vertices that make up the shape. And on this right circle, we have 16 of these verts. Whereas on this left one, the subdivision surface model, we only have 4, which was the same amount that we had in our original polygon. And that's the second really important thing to know about subdivision surfaces. You keep the same amount of verts to edit. So on this one, we've still got the same 4 that we had for the square. But Modo is automatically going in, and based on the position of those verts, it's adding in some extra detail to give us this nice curved mesh. Now the benefit of this is that if we go to our subdivision surface layer, grab one of these verts and move it around into position. So I'm just going to move this out over to there, and maybe we'll grab this guy, kind of move this down a bit. You see we get a kind of more complex curved shape that maintains a very nice curve around its outside. It's a bit blocky, albeit for the minute, but it's a very nice kind of evenly spaced curve around the outside here. Now to create this shape in this layer, in this other mesh item, you'd have to come in and singularly move around all of these verts like this, and it's just going to take you much more time, and you're less likely to get it as smooth as this one over here on the left. The final thing I'm going to cover is why is this mesh on the left still slightly blocky? If Modo is going in and adding detail for us, why can we still see these harsh edges? And it all has something to do with the subdivision level. Now that is set for each mesh item within your scene. Now to make things a bit easier, I'm just going to delete our mesh 2 layer so we can just concentrate on our SDS mesh item, which is our subdivision surface object. So I'm just going to zoom in on that slightly. Now you can find the subdivision level under the Properties tab for your current mesh layer. So with SDS selected, I'm going to go to the Properties tab, And right down here at the bottom we have subdivision level, and it's currently set to 2. Now I'm going to change that down to 1, so I'm going to lower the subdivision level, and we're going to see what happens. So take a look at our mesh. When I hit enter, you can see that it becomes much less detailed. So as we've lowered the subdivision level, Modo is adding in less detail to our subdivision surface object. Now to quickly show you what exactly is going on, I'm going to hit tab to go out of subdivision surface mode, or SDS mode, which would be a much quicker way of saying it, and we get our original 4-sided polygon back. Now when we hit tab with a subdivision level of 1, Modo is saying, right, we're going to move these vertices in ever so slightly towards each other, and in doing so we're going to add extra detail to our mesh. How much extra detail are we going to add? Well, it is the subdivision level times 2. So this edge, this one edge at the top here between these two verts, is going to become 1 times 2, which is 2, so 2 edges. Now if I hit tab, you'll see that this one edge has indeed become 2. Now if I change this to 2, each existing edge in our model is going to become 2 times 2 number of edges. 2 times 2 is 4. So each one of our existing edges is going to be converted to 4 new ones. So I'm going to hit enter, and you can see we have indeed got 4 edges in here. So that's the formula. Now if you can't understand it right now, don't worry, it's not entirely important to know at this stage. It's not really hugely vital, but it's a good thing to try and get your head round. So basically the number of edges Modo is adding in to each existing edge in your scene is twice the subdivision level. So if I was to change this to 3, twice 3 is 6, so each existing edge would become 6 new ones. So I'm going to hit enter, I'm going to come down and just make sure that that's 6. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new edges that Modo is adding in. So that's a kind of easy way to understand the subdivision level. Now the obvious thing would be come in here and so do something like 25 or 24, which is the maximum, and you'd get a perfectly smooth mesh, and that's a great way, to get something really, really smooth. But it's adding in a lot of extra detail that you don't necessarily need to your scene, and that's going to hit you in render time. It's also going to make things a lot slower when you try and model. So the key is to try and keep this as low as possible whilst maintaining the amount of detail and resolution that you need in your object. So I'm going to put this down to about 3 and hit enter. And you can see we can still see a bit of blockiness over on the right here, so maybe 4 and hit enter. There's a little bit of blockiness, but it's not overly too noticeable. So I'd say 4 is pretty good, maybe 5 as a maximum. So there you can see this looks pretty smooth right now. You're not really going to notice any blockiness around that at all. So the key thing is to remember to keep the subdivision level as low as possible. Now there's a much more to this really, but I'm not going to go into that right now. I'll cover that in a rendering tutorial later on. So for now all you need to know is that the subdivision level kind of controls the resolution of the mesh. Now I like to work using subdivision surfaces to help my normal polygonal modeling, and we'll cover that when we make the next couple of tools. But for starters, we're going to make the nail file using entirely subdivision surface modeling techniques, so you can kind of see how that's done. So back in our normal scene, and with our nail file layer selected, I'm going to come up to the basic tab and click the pen tool. And we're going to start off by doing exactly the same thing as before. We're going to come in and start adding in some of these edges like this. So I'm just clicking on all of the corners. Now when we get to a curve like this, before where we'd kind of put an edge down there, what I'm going to do is just put it right in the middle of the curve like that. I'm going to keep going, so I'm going to put one there. There's kind of a corner there as well, so we'll put an edge there. And we've got a very big curve here, so instead of just one vert in the middle, I'm going to actually split that up into about 2. So I'll put one about there, maybe one about there, and then we'll put one just here as well, and the transition between this straight edge and this curve. So maybe move that way a little bit, maybe this way just a little bit as well. Just kind of even out the spacing between these guys. And with that done, I can hit space to drop the tool, and we can go in, and just like before, we're going to straighten out these edges. So I'm going to select this top one, hit R for scale, and with negative scale turned off, I'm just going to slam that down on the Y. I'm going to do the same thing for this bottom one, so grab it, slam it down on the Y, and this one as well. We're going to slam that down on the z-axis like that. I think there's one more. Yeah, we'll grab this guy at the end as well, and we'll just slam that down on the z-axis like that. Now we're going to be using subdivision surfaces to model this shape. So now's as good a time as any to see what this looks like in subdivision surface mode. So I'm going to hit tab on my keyboard and see what we get. So hit tab. Now I'm just going to highlight our mesh so we can see what's going on. And you'll see we've completely lost this left hand side. It now looks like this really ugly curve here. And we've also lost these hard edges in this point and this point. So how do we make Modo maintain these hard corners where we need them? Now what you need to do is essentially add in extra detail, extra edges and verts to lock or anchor the existing points where you want them. Now I'll show you exactly what I mean. So I'm going to go out of subdivision surface mode by hitting the tab key. I'm going to come over here to the left and take a look at our verts. Now we want these guys to maintain their position right here on the corners of our blue ref image. However, when we go to subdivision surface mode, they're being pulled both to the right towards the other verts at the other end of the model and towards each other. Now we want to basically surround them to keep them where they are. Now what we're going to do is use the slice tool, which is Shift C, and we're going to add an extra edge right down next to them. And what this edge is doing is basically saying, right, you guys stay where you are, I'm going to move instead. So I'm blocking you guys from moving to the right. So if I hit tab now, you'll see that this edge that we blocked in stays exactly where we want it. So we've kind of blocked that guy in position. Now what I did then was hit the tab key with an edge selected, and subdivision surface mode only works on polygons, so you need to deselect that edge and then hit tab. So by adding in this extra edge, we've blocked this edge where we want it, but only horizontally. If I go back into subdivision surface mode, you'll notice that these verts are still moving towards each other. So what do we need to do? We need to block them in vertically as well. So to do that, I'm going to come in and with the edge slice tool, which is C, I'm going to add in an extra edge just there like that. So we end up with this kind of square on the corner. Now notice what happens. I'm not going to do the bottom one, so we can compare the two. If I hit tab, you'll notice this top one is much pointier than this bottom one. This vert is staying right on the corner of the ref image where we want it. So clearly that's the way forward. So I'm going to tab and go and add in that bottom edge down here as well. Now you'll notice, if I go into tab again, that this corner still isn't particularly nice. It's kind of not like a nice beveled edge like we want it. It's kind of slightly leaning this way and then slightly coming down on this edge here, and that's not at all what we want. So why is that happening? It's because these existing edges, these anchor edges that we just added in, aren't themselves being anchored by anything. We have this huge expanse of space right in the middle before we even get to another vert. So these anchor edges are being pulled all the way to the right, and that's kind of distorting our mesh over here on this left side. So what we can do is add in another anchor edge for the existing anchor edges. So with the slice tool, I'm going to hit Shift C, and we're going to go in and add in another vertical edge like that. And then we can go in and join up these guys like this, and then we're going to go in and add in another vertical anchor edge like that down there, and do the same thing up the top. And now if we go into subdivision surface mode, we get a very nice beveled looking corner like that. And you can see that all of these edges maintain their position pretty well. This corner vert is kind of curving in a bit, but these edges are pretty much exactly where we left them. And that's the key thing that we're going to do for the rest of this mesh, and also for some of the rest of the tools of this model. So essentially all you do is anchor the existing points where they are by surrounding them by new edges. So that's the main technique we're going to be using.